Welcome to the Backcountry Cardio Podcast. And today we have guest Cody Worley on here, and he's going to be going over kind of all things mule deer. The season opens on September 2nd here in Colorado. I wanted to have a podcast about chasing mule deer, maybe even a little elk conversation in there because Cody has killed some really big bucks the last couple of years. And this year he is actually going to have to skip the season to become a firefighter and grow a mustache. I wanted to point that out. He hasn't had it yet. So I wanted him on here to take us through kind of some hunting tactics and things he's used to find success. So how are you, Cody?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on again. I know it's been a couple years since we've chatted, so
Absolutely.
good to be back. But yeah, we've been busy the last couple years, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, real quick here. You were an electrician.
Mhm.
Family had a company, and then you're switching to firefighting so you can have more time to go in the mountains, I think.
Yeah. Firefighting was always kind of a dream job for me. So about 2.5 years ago, I started the process and finally received a job offer from one of the local departments here in the Denver metro area. And so I'm currently in the fire academy, and unfortunately, it will run right through September. And I will not have any time to spend bow hunting this year, but it's kind of an investment of time for the future because with the
Right.
schedule, it's a really good job to have to be able to pursue different hobbies such as firefight or hunting that take
Right.
up a lot of your off times. That's kind of the process right now that I'm in, and but yeah, I had a really awesome year hunting last year, and before that was fortunate enough to shoot really mature, respectable mule deer, both in 2023 and 2024, and then last year as well, I was working as a hunting guide full time, kind of through the rest of September and the rest of the fall on a ranch outside of Meeker, Colorado. So got to spend quite a bit of time guiding. That was primarily all elk hunting, so it was a lot of fun. But that's kind of been the last couple years of my life is bow hunting for mule deer, elk, and guiding, and then now we're getting into firefighting.
Awesome, man. I'm excited for you. I know, like you said, we've been busy the last couple of years, you and I. And, I always kind of tell myself at some point, hunting might have to be put on the back shelf for a short time to gain a lot of it later. And it sounds like you're doing that. So I'm pumped for you. But, I want to get into a couple things. First off, since you've had great success, and I'll show the viewers a couple of these here you've taken in the last couple of years. But Colorado is kind of a mule deer mecca. Like people associate Colorado with big mule deer, usually high country, alpine type stuff. So what drew you originally to chasing them up there?
Yeah, I've always spent a lot of time in the high country hunting for elk. That has always been my method is getting into the areas where I can see for long distances, so above timberline, and kind of hunting them in those types of habitats. And in doing so, would see, a fair bit of mule deer in the high country, especially in late August, early September, because once they shed their velvet, as they do, they kind of go back down into the timber. So, and I've always just loved everything about being up above timberline, just kind of the peace and tranquility and the harshness of it all. Just when you're in those stubble trees, because that's the only thing that can grow at that elevation, when you're at anywhere from 11 to 12, depending on how high you go. And then when you're at that 12,500 to 13,000 mark, there's just nothing. It's like moon.
Right.
It's like you're on the moon up there, especially at different times of the day, right at sunrise, sunset, and even as it's getting dark, sometimes it feels like it takes so long to get dark because the moon is out. So it's just a very special place. I spend a lot of time in the high country, both, scouting and hunting, and I'm always drawn to getting up higher. And there's even been times where I've been elk hunting and I'm just like, I'm too high. I'm seeing
Right.
more mountain goats, and then I kind of have to. I always just like to get high, find animals, and then I drop below them and get into the timber. But a lot of times it's just such a useful tactic for me to kind of use my glass to do a lot of the walking. So
Right.
that's kind of
You know,
always been my tactic.
well, and typically from my experience, and I think this is what draws a lot of hunters to that high country is well, A, you can see, right? You're not stuck in the timber, but animals usually look downhill. I think they get to a
Hmm.
point and they kind of, naturally are looking down, bedded down. They're not usually staring uphill. So I think in the high country, one thing that helps is if you can get up high enough, like you just said, you start up high and you kind of work, go down. I think that's naturally like what I've done is
Hmm.
try to get above them, you know, I guess depending on what's going on with that. But yeah, if you've never hunted above tree line, it's definitely different. Uh, you
Hmm.
just you see a lot of animals. Well, sometimes you find these pockets, but with that, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the highest deer elevation wise you've ever seen?
Deer?
And you think you've seen one over 13,000?
I don't think I have personally. I know my dad has, he kind of pioneered a lot of the area that I hunt, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And I know he's talked about seeing deer so high up in the rocks, they'll come down to feed, but then they climb up into those rocks to
Right,
bed. And it's just like, you're in another dimension. But most of the time, for me, they're still in kind of the willowed areas. Like if,
right,
in the backgrounds of both the pictures of the bucks that I shot in the last 2 years, there's willows. So I see them get up high, but I've never seen them probably over like 12.4, 12.5. But I have
okay,
heard of, gosh, yeah, them being at 13,000. Like that's not a big deal for them to
right,
be up that high, which is kind of interesting because I just don't know if many people, obviously avid mule deer hunters know that they get up that high, but like a lot of people don't expect mule deer to do that. So when you're looking for a mature buck, and if you don't have the experience of kind of knowing their habitat, that might be like one of the last areas that you're going to look. So,
yeah. I mean, this has been a while, 19 maybe something like that. Me and some friends were on a mule deer hunt, and we found this herd of deer, and I say herd because there was like, I think at one point we counted 26 or 27 different bucks that were together, but they were in this big bowl, and it was just like granite shale, and it just went up to this peak that at some point was around, I want to say it was like 13.8 at the top of that peak. Now, they weren't sitting at 13.8, but they
hmm.
had to be somewhere around 13,000, and there was no way to get to them. You can walk up to the bottom where the bull started and just look at them. I mean, some of the bucks in there. I mean, I've got a video of this one buck. He's a true 200-inch deer. Now, and not typical like style frame. It just he had trash everywhere. He was big. He was wide. And another guy up there had seen him before and said, here's an up close shot of him like in late July, and that's why he was there looking for the same buck. And he's like, yeah, he's a 200 plus inch deer, but you couldn't do anything. I mean, he literally
Yeah.
this whole herd just up on these rocks, and you couldn't go above them. I mean, there was just no way unless you rappelled down, I guess. And you're not going to shoot a deer doing that with a bow. You
Yeah.
knock rocks off and stuff. But yeah, they get up crazy high. So on that topic, let's say next year you're getting back in the game. You're going to hunt. When do you start scouting? And what's your primary tactics you're going to use? Look for trail cameras. What are you doing? Walk us through that. And
Yeah.
assume, and let's assume you're going to a new area. Okay, so you're just like, hey, I found this spot on Google Earth. It's met what I want, what I'm interested in, and I'm gonna go check it out. So what are those things you're looking for, and you're gonna do?
I mean, the e-scouting is unbelievable these days. And I don't even consider myself a very good e-scouter, but if I was going to be kind of starting over with a whole new area, I would start in the very beginning of like not only using e-scouting software, but using some like there's a lot of different programs and seminars that you can educate yourself on how to use, those types of programs like Onyx to the absolute full. And I would be doing that as soon as you can in the year, January, February, March, thinking about areas that you want to hunt. And then when you finally realize where you are going to hunt, putting the time behind the computer. But I put a lot of emphasis on getting into those areas as soon as like July 4th weekend is kind of always I've tried to go up earlier and, there'll be a lot of snow up in the high country still. So that's kind of always my marker is July 4th weekend. And then through July and August, taking weekend trips to try and just get eyes on animals, but then a lot of times too, just to understand the country that you're in. And if an area looks really good, yeah, there may not be animals there right then, but I don't necessarily write an area completely off. I'll kind of still keep it in my notes to keep an eye on, if it looks like it's a really good habitat. So I just put a lot of emphasis on still going into those areas, finding my campsites, trying to find what's there. And I'm not really big on having like a target buck, super early on. I'm not like super picky when it comes to, I've just been really fortunate to put in the time that when I do find a mature buck, I try and make all my decisions that, okay, I'm gonna go for that buck. But just with the realistic expectation of I want to shoot a mature animal, but at the end of the day, if I really want to punch my tag,
Right.
I'm going to be reasonable with myself. And I always just find a lot of gratification and success with a bow. The size of the antlers aren't, my driving factor necessarily.
Right.
With that said, like I don't use trail cameras. I don't use any of that technology. I do a lot of glassing and digiscoping I just love watching animals through, high quality glass. I've invested a lot of money into European optics. I use Swarovski binoculars I have a 65 millimeter Swarovski spotting scope that I have set up with a digiscoping and a tripod. So spending a lot of time just watching animals, what are their habits, and just understanding where they're at, what they're doing, where can I camp, and then just the logistics of, okay, how am I going to get to them? And a lot of times too, that may be when you're actually hunting. If you're someone that's coming from out of state or you just are in a new area, don't be afraid to just go for it and do a little bit of scouting while you're hunting as well, especially if you've kind of ran out some of your prime areas. Don't don't give up and go home. Just try a
Right.
new area.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about like water in those situations? I mean, when you get up in the high country, sometimes water can be kind of scarce. Are you looking for a water source that the animals would go to as well in the high country? Or even for
Not
yourself,
necess
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely for myself. I have been in some areas where you have to think about how you're getting water, but for the most part, the areas that I've hunted, I've always camped closer to water as high as I possibly can, and then just relied on my fitness to get me higher. I don't like packing in a lot of water super high.
right,
So, with that said, a lot of the areas that I have hunted aren't extremely scarce on water. I've known some guys to go into like areas where you're not really coming below 12.5
right,
feet in elevation. You're in that 12.5 to 13,000, where I think I probably have just ended up being a little bit lower than that. So water is usually not as scarce. I guess it's just a little bit different for me in that sense where I'm not worried about it too much just because of where I'm going. But mainly it's what is the foot traffic there? And what I'm
right.
talking about is like for people, because if there's trails, like hiking trails, there's not going to be animals there. Or if they
Yeah.
are, they're going to be there at a very particular time, super early or super late in the day when people typically aren't on those trails. So that's kind of more so what I'm looking at is where they're not, hiking trails.
Right.
So I do spend time, think,
Yeah, especially in Colorado, because Colorado is not I think Wyoming and say Idaho, I think they have a lot more land that's kind of off limits to people. And I don't mean that you can't go there. I just mean accessibility to those places. Like I believe Idaho has the Frank Church Wilderness, kind of in the southern central area, and it's massive. And sure, there's some hiking trails, but Colorado just has so much access to the mountains that
hmm
for the most part, everywhere I go, I'll get off, I should say, I'll get off trail and I'm not going to see people in the basins I want to go to, but I always see people on the trails getting into those places. Like, okay, I'm going to get up here. Here's a basin that's got a trail going by it. And yeah, I'll see 25 people in a day going there. So I will typically like, okay, this basin looks amazing, but there's a trail that runs right through the bottom of it, and every single mom and daughter and son and dad are stopping here to take a picture of the doe that stands up on the hill every morning.
hmm
The big bucks aren't going to be there. They're going to be at the basin on, around the corner that nobody knows is there other than somebody
Yeah.
specifically looking for it. Because not only that, but scent, right? Like people always, I think new hunters don't realize how important scent is. So if you have people zigzagging across the hill, those animals smell that, and they know that people have been there. And I'm going to get into this next question because on the topic of scent, because you can fool the deer's eyes to an extent. You can, be quiet and then not hear you, but you will never fool their nose.
Hmm.
Same with elk. Like that is their like number one, like, hey, we smell you, we are gone before you even get within a quarter mile. So when you find that big buck, like the last few years, what's your process? There he is. He's 300 yards away across the basin in the willows. I see his antlers. Whatever you did to spot him. What's your moves to actually get within bow range and kill that deer?
I mean, understanding the typical thermals throughout the day is the absolute baseline. Understanding that early in the morning, the area is going to be dropping, and then throughout the day, it's going to be rising. So, laying out your stock accordingly with what the wind is going to be doing based off where that animal's at is how you need to be beginning your process. And so, with the buck that I shot in 2024 last year, I spotted him at like 6 a.m. in the morning and wasn't able to begin my stalk until after 9 a.m. to where the winds were going to be shifted, which I always or think of myself as first and foremost an elk hunter. And when
Right,
you see elk, you go to the elk because they're probably not going to be there very long. And
right,
so really remembering to force myself to sit down behind the glass until two things happen. One, the wind was going to be kind of in its set condition for the day, or, you're going to get little gusts here and there. If it's a
right,
bad windy day, man, it just might not be the day to make a stalk on that buck.
right.
Don't
And if
blow
you
them
do,
out.
exactly. Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say what you're gonna say because if you rush the stock, I mean, and you blow him out of there,
Hmm.
he's just, I mean, he could be three basins away by the morning. So
Yep. And that's where mule deer hunting is a patient man's game more so than like if you blow elk out of a basin during the rut, if the lead cow wants to go back in there 2-3 days, they're gonna do that. If you blow a mature buck out of the basin, early in the bow season, he's never coming back. I
right,
almost guarantee it. So if it's a bad day, just you're gonna have to wait on them. But I remember that day in particular, the winds were, kind of starting to go into their rhythm for the day. And I didn't start my stalk until after 9 a.m. And it took me about 2.5 hours. I marked my shot time was at 11:22 a.m. So at that point, the wind was rising with its
right.
uphill thermals. The sun had hit that basin and it was going up. So
How far
it's
away did
funny
you
though.
originally? Well, how far was he when you originally spotted him?
Somewhere I think between like 800 and 1,000 yards.
Okay, there's a
And
ways.
so I had to kind of go up and do a huge loop to get, above him and get
Right,
out of sight to where I could drop straight in on him. And then going back, the second thing I was going to say that I was waiting on him to do was to find his second bed. And it's interesting because I let him do that. And then he ended up actually rebedding a third time. And then by the time I got to him and made the shot, he was standing up feeding again. But I've heard guys talk about this quite a bit. Mule deer will have their first bed, sometime in like that 7 to 9 a.m.
hmm,
Because the sun's going to come up. They're going to be feeding before the sun's up is like what I've always seen. And then they're going to rebed somewhere around like that 9 to 11. And then that's likely where they're going to be until like 2 to 3, 4 p.m. Who knows how long? The buck that I
right.
shot in the year before, 2023, it was about 2:30 p.m. by the time he finally stood up to start feeding, which I think was a little early. I was already standing there for 4 hours waiting for him to stand up. But I
Why?
was like,
How close were you? How close were you when you were been waiting?
I was 30 yards away from him. And it's
Okay,
funny, that's too close, too long in most instances.
right,
But this particular instance, this buck was bedded on about the same plane that I was, but he was in these very thick willows. Like it was somewhat level, is what I'm getting at. But he was
right,
bedded in these thick willows to where my scent, I know, was going over the top of him and not dropping into his little pocket that he was in, because a number of times I would feel the wind at my neck and I would be ready to draw my bow.
right.
And so once I figured out that he couldn't smell me, regardless of, I was like, Now it's just a waiting game. I will wait
Right.
here all day if I have to until dark. Um, and so, yeah, I waited for 4 hours for him to stand up, just kind of at the ready position with an arrow knocked. And when he finally did, I was able to get a shot at like 30, 32 yards.
Well, is that the one? Wasn't there another guy in the basin watching you, and you got a video of it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that?
A guy that I I
And you didn't know him, right? It was just complete coincidence he was there.
well, I didn't. I knew of him, and I thought I recognized him through my glass. And what ended up happening is him and I both shot 3D league at the local archery shop, and
Okay.
so. But I never like went up and introduced myself. So once I shot and he came down, we kind of had like a "Hey, I know you," moment, because he came down and he was going to help me track the buck. He had kind of seen right where he went. That buck ran about 150, 200 yards, and I had ended up finding him before he ever made it down. I was like, "Oh, he's right down here. Like he's down." And he's like, "Oh man, that's good," because I was worried. He got down into thick stuff and was gonna be gone. I was gonna come help you track. So he was a super nice guy. He helped me bone him out. We're still buds, and yeah, he's actually guiding full time now. So,
Oh, nice.
but that was a funny deal. Yeah,
But did you know he was in the basin watching?
I did. I saw him
Like,
come in.
okay. But did he know that buck was there?
He did. Yeah,
Okay.
he had came in like the day before
Okay.
and like the day before season, or like a couple days before, and knew the buck was
Oh,
there. But there was another buck, a bigger buck, I believe, that he tried because that was opening day when I shot that buck.
okay.
And he tried opening morning in this other area for this other deer. And then he was coming into my area in the afternoon to try for the buck that I was after. And there was another good buck in that basin as well. And so he stayed in there to try and get a shot and never linked up with him. So, but yeah, I watched him come over the top of the basin. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I could see a bow in his
Right.
hand through my binoculars. I'm like, and then when I finally saw him hold up, way up in the rocks, I was like, okay, he obviously sees me down here, and he was
Right.
very, very respectful. So it was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. I remember seeing the picture of like that the guy took or whatever from the video clip, and it was like, man, that's that's a like once in a lifetime for a
Hmm.
random person to peek over the top and get that. So on these high country hunts, what they push you hard. What
Hmm.
do you think physically or mentally is the hardest thing you've been through on one, or maybe collectively it's all like each hunt. You've done a hunt where it's like, man, that was the hardest hunt I've ever done for multiple reasons. But kind of take us through like, really how tough these hunts are, because I don't think that social media in our society, I think, kind of gives us a false idea of what true backcountry hunting is, but it is physically and mentally demanding if you've been out there, especially days on end. So for you, what do you think one of the hardest things you've had to encounter out there or deal with, or maybe the whole hunt has been for you?
Oh man, every hunt has its moments. When you and I first got linked together, it was after I'd shot that really nice 6x6 bull in 2021. And I remember that was on day 10 of a solo hunt. Just the mental up and downs that you go through. I had missed a bull that season. I'd been on elk. I'd been on elk the year before. And you get so close to the point where you're ready to throw in the towel. And I remember that morning was kind of like, okay, well, if I don't hear something, then I'm going to go into a different area, or I don't know, maybe I'll go home. Who knows? But ended up hearing a bugle and getting eyes on elk. And I remember the last like 400 yards that I had to close was just this really steep, like spine ridge that came off of this main mountain. And like walking up that, I just remember your legs are on day 10 of a hunt. You've been hunting hard every single day. And I'm kind of telling myself, this is in the morning. If I don't get up here, I know what these elk are going to do. They're going to be gone, or the wind's going to shift. And then
Right.
they're going to know I'm here because the wind was still coming downhill at that point. And so it was literally just every step up this super steep incline with a 50-pound pack because I was like bivvy hunting,
Right.
and your heart is just absolutely redlining, and you're just giving it everything you got because you're like, this is what I've been out here 10 days for. Like, here's my opportunity. Here's elk. I'm within 200 yards. All I have to do is close this distance. And so I make it up that hill, and it levels off. And I kind of get to the point where the herd is. And that bull ended up coming out, 40 yards to me cow calling a couple times. But that specific moment was like, that high intensity, you're pushing everything you have, redlining your heart rate, zone 5. I know you know what that is.
Right.
And but then in other hunts, it's just, the year after that, I hunted like 21 days and I wounded a bull that year. And then after, I had some really hard weather, like a bunch of rain, and it's just like depressing. And so I remember going into an area and it was pouring rain. And so I'm starting off with everything is soaking wet.
Boy,
And it's just like, well, I want to keep hunting. I want to still have an opportunity here. I
right.
still have time. So just some of those mental ups and downs, yeah, it's 100%. It's physical at moments, and then other moments it's 100% mental. That
Right.
what is it going to take to pull me off this mountain, or what do I need to do to stay up here and not go home, not throw in the towel. But with like last year's mule deer hunt, I had hunted 5 days before seeing any deer, and I'd
Yeah.
put in, by the time I shot my buck and packed him out, in 6 days, I did 51 miles. So I went way
Mm,
into an area and I basically hunted my way back out and I shot my buck. I was at the furthest I was from my truck, I was about 12 miles.
okay.
And then I shot my buck, I was about 4 miles from my truck. So I still had a 4 mile pack out. And I don't know if you want to kind of segue into like, well, what do I do to train for those types of
Yeah.
hunts? That year, kind of ironically enough, I had signed up for my first ultra marathon, which
Right.
was a 50-mile ultra marathon.
Yeah. Well,
So
I guess real quick here before you say that, like, how many trips did it take you to get the deer out? Were you able to do it in one?
one trip, yeah,
One trip. Okay. But did you have
I did. But I did have my dad came up and helped me
okay.
pack out that buck.
Right. Right. So if you're solo, for people that don't get it, you're if you kill, let's say you kill that mule deer, and they can be big, especially a bigger
Hmm.
one. At 4 miles in and you're solo and you have camp,
Hmm.
you're 4 miles out with, say, the whole deer, if you could do the whole deer. And most people cannot bring out a whole entire deer in one trip. Most, not saying you can't, but most. So let's say you got two trips for the deer. So four out, four back, four out. So that's 12 miles. And now you got to go get camp. Depending on where camp was, you can have a 16 to 20 mile day
Hmm.
because you shot a deer.
Hmm.
And that's not 16 miles of I-25 freeway flat. You know what I'm saying? It's brutal. And when you're doing that many miles, and a lot of that is off trail, you're not even on a trail, which makes it even more demanding. So I just wanted to get that out there for people that are listening real quick before you kind of rolled into how you trained for it. Killing a deer or an elk at 4 miles does not mean you're only going to put in 4 miles of work. It kind of can mean you're, you know, 4 times that amount, especially with an elk. If you were solo to kill an elk, I mean, it, it can be just almost devastating mentally to realize how much you're going to have to do. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, go ahead. You started training for an ultra to get in shape for that, which is probably a pretty smart idea. So tell us more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my first ultra. I'd done a road marathon and had a pretty good idea of um, where my fitness was going into training for the ultra. And that race in particular was 50 miles, and it was supposedly 13,000 feet of vert. I think it ended up being between like 12 and 13.
Okay.
But that is a lot of vertical feet for a 50-mile race, because there's a lot of races. Leadville itself, Leadville 100, I don't think it's much more than that,
Lead
13.
Leadville's, I think, just under 15, but that's over a course of
Hmm.
100 miles. So
Right.
you climb twice as much as for every mile as Leadville.
Yeah.
And Lead and
Yeah, it was.
Leadville's considered, I believe, like either the hardest 100. I don't know if it's the hardest 100 in the world, but it's definitely the hardest 100 in the country because of the vertical feet.
Yeah. So having something early in the year, putting a lot of emphasis on, training for something from a fitness standpoint, has always been really important. And I think that's where you and I relate of picking a race, getting in shape for that, and then letting that kind of be the foundation for your fitness going into hunting season. One thing I did differently going into the season in 2024, which for me had great effects, was I did that race. The race was in June, and then I was able to maintain my cardio just through kind of knowing where my heart rate would be, like during different training sessions, whether I was doing like kettlebell or other runs. But I started to transition more into training specifically for mountain hunting, which
Right.
involved a lot of like unilateral type step up and high intensity type workouts. And the program I was using was the Mountain Tough app,
Right.
which really worked well. And I recommend that. They do a great job. I was actually using that in preparation for the Fire Academy, just
Okay.
because the mental aspect of their workouts is very specific for mountain hunting and how difficult that can be. You and I both know what it's like to go do a hard tempo workout or speed workout, and like how mentally you kind of have to prep yourself for that
Right.
versus doing a 20-mile long run on Sunday. It's just like, oh, that's an easy
Right.
day, you know? So yeah, mentally going through some of those workouts and the exercises, the programming that they would do has been very important for preparing for those mountain hunts, preparing for Fire Academy. But man, I noticed a big difference in just my leg strength,
Right.
for climbing and hip mobility. Like, really good program. I noticed a big difference, and I always advocate to my friends and family that are going to be doing mountain hunting. I'm like, check out their program, give it a shot, because like it really worked for me, and I noticed a difference going into 2024 last year. But yeah, I thought it was interesting how at the end of that season it was 51 miles, and then at the end of the race it was 51 miles, you know, altogether.
Right.
So it was funny that it ended up being that. But
Did you
yeah,
add
it
up
was a
all the
good year.
did you add up all the vertical miles that you ran or hiked during your hunt?
No, it was a lot though. I can tell you that, you know, and
Oh
that's
man.
when you were asking earlier about, you know, some of the hard moments, man, some of the hard moments are just packing in between different basins, you know, when you still have your 50 pounds of camp on your back and, you know, going up and down to get to this next basin. Cause, you know, like that hunt for me was like checking off boxes. Like, okay, there's no deer here. There's no deer here. There's no deer here
Right.
until finally I made it to the basin where it's like, okay, here's some bucks. So
Right.
that's where it gets to be a grind too of, man, you're hitting the trail or you're hitting if you're bushwhacking, just trying to get to the next area in time to set up to glass.
Yeah, and I really don't think even though you see stuff on social media and YouTube has lots of hunting videos, until you've really done it, you don't really get a good idea what it's like. Because like you were just saying about the mountain tough stuff, like fitness for me has never been my Achilles heel. Obviously I'm fit.
Hmm.
But even for me, I do a lot of, I definitely incorporate a lot of leg stuff. I don't get big legs, but I do incorporate big, leg stuff. Like, I think of the word, deadlifts, trap squats. I do lots of trap squats, things like that. And step ups, like just, put a bench in front of me and just kind of step up onto it. It's just, it helps runners. What you were saying about hiking all day and going up over stuff, when you lift your legs up and over deadfall all day long, you may not notice it right then, but
Hmm.
typically what happens is that next day, it's like you wake up and your hip flexors just for people that aren't prepared. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, I am beat. I cannot I cannot go again, and then that's where it's all of a sudden that pull to like, is it really that big of a deal if I get out of the tent this morning? Like, I don't really need to get up there that early. And I think that's a big difference in success is people that are prepared for every single day um, out there. Did you say you went 21 hunting days and you didn't kill anything?
Yeah, that was in 2022. So I did not have a mule deer tag that
Oh,
year. I had a draw elk tag. And
right,
so I was 100% in on elk that
right,
particular year. I think bottom line, the guys that are in the best shape for a mountain hunt are the guys that are putting on packs and doing a lot of
Right.
scouting. And so you can't undermine, like, I'm not a huge proponent of like rucking around my neighborhood. I
Right.
do a little bit now, like during fire academy, because we always have air packs on our back, which weigh about 30 pounds. And so I'm always just trying to build, the muscles that
Yeah.
kind of support that air pack. And it's just low intensity cardio too. Like I have to
Right.
keep it pretty light on my days off, but there's no substitute for going and doing a scouting trip and knowing like, okay, my hunting pack, if I'm bivvy hunting for elk or if I'm backcountry hunting for mule deer is going to be in the range of 35 to 55 pounds. Take 50 pounds of
Right.
gear in on a scouting trip and see what it's like to hike around for
Right.
3 or 4 days. And if you only have a day, that's fine. But I always really like doing at least once a year, like a 3 to 4 day scouting trip, because you're going to, just kind of see where your legs at that year. Yeah,
Right.
your hip flexors are burning. And um, yeah, there's no substitute for doing that stuff if you can before a hunt. And if you're an out of state guy, like, man, if you can swing it, take a couple days and come out just to put boots to ground, get some camp spots marked, find some water holes for yourself or for animals. But that's such valuable intel and just seeing how your body's going to react and testing gear and all of that. So put a lot of emphasis on that.
Okay. So, kind of our last question before we wrap this up. What's the biggest advice you would give a brand new bow hunter? Like you're at your archery 3D range, guy walks in, says, I want a bow. I'm going to start hunting, but he has no real idea. He
Mhm.
watched a YouTube video and he got pumped up, and I'm going to do this. That guy walks out on the range and asks you basic questions like, what's the first stuff you're going to tell him? It's like, hey, he's on mule deer hunting this year. He's got this image in his head that he's gonna, you know, go big. What advice do you have for that guy or girl?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I'm happy that we've saved a good amount of chunk of time for this one because this is something that I'm pretty passionate about as a bow hunter because I am a newly late in life onset bow hunter. I did not start bow hunting until 2020. For the amount of time that I've done it, I feel like I've been very successful. I've
Yeah,
killed 3 mature animals, with my bow. And if I was to bump into that guy at the archery range and they, say, hey, how successful have you been? What do you have to do? You have to make it like, or at least what I've done to be successful. It is my only hobby. I don't
right,
snowboard. I used to ride motocross. Everything that I do as hobbies, fitness, running, to marathons, that it's kind of the Cam Hanes approach in a sense. It's all for bow hunting.
right,
But I love archery and I have become a student of the sport. I do all my own bow tuning. I build my bows, I build my arrows, I have a bow shop in my basement. But that's just me. If you want to do it, just be reasonable with the amount of time that you're going to give yourself to do it
right,
because the animal that you're attempting to kill with your bow and arrow deserves that respect of a humane and quick lethal death. And you have to give yourself the time to become proficient with that weapon. We could get into, you know, the cost of bow hunting, the price of bows these days, everything. I'm the guy that for many years have bought a new bow every year because I love archery and I love to, test the new technology, to play with it, to tinker, all of that. But I think of the saying, it's a Bruce Lee quote, beware of the man who, how does it go? I fear not the man that knows, 10,000 different kicks, but I fear the man
right,
that has done the same kick 10,000 times.
right,
So if you have a budget bow, take the time to make sure it is as accurate as possible and to shoot your broadheads and to shoot your hunting setup. And a mistake I made a lot early as an archer, especially before I had a shop in my basement, and I still make this mistake, is by changing little things on your bow. I'm going to try this release or I'm going to try this
uh,
sight.
yep,
if you change one thing, one of my archery mentors said, if you change one thing, you change everything. If you change your
Makes
D
sense.
loop, if you change your peep heights, if you change your arrow setup, your fletches, anything. So you kind of I always kind of have like a drop dead date that by, gosh, for sure no later than August 1st, I'm not changing anything on my bow. You have to leave it the same. I get anxious about changing a D loop, honestly. And it just seems that you have to build that confidence in your setup and be able to shoot, within your effective range. And that's a term you'll hear a lot. And that's a term as an archer, you have to be honest with yourself of what is your effective range. Like, for me, I'm not a guy that I really like to take shots under 30 or 40 yards just because you're so close to the animal. They can hear and see every little thing that you're doing. I would rather be in like that 40 to 60 range to where I can be a little more relaxed because I know the animal isn't necessarily going to hear me draw my bow back or,
Right.
you know,
You have some room
hear
for
every
there.
little thing. Yeah.
Right.
But I
In a
can be
sense.
extremely accurate because I've shot my setup 10 to 20,000 times, leading up to it. Like this year, I don't plan on buying a new bow just because I didn't even get to hunt with the bow. I'm not going to get to hunt with the bow that I have this year. So like by 2026 season, I'm going to have a lot of time into my setup and I'm going to,
Yeah.
be very, very accurate, very confident. And so that would kind of be what I would want to tell that new archer is try and stay off social media as much as you can. If you're going to watch YouTube videos, really be discerning with who is the content creator. Are they trying to sell something? Like I feel, one of the guys that keeps it pretty honest is Josh Jones, MFJJ,
Mhm.
Spokane Valley Archery. The dude has an archery shop. So yeah, he wants to sell product, but he's not like any particular product is, he's not like sponsored by all the companies that he's selling.
Right.
So you really have to be kind of discerning of that. And the fact of the matter is there's guys killing animals every year with bows that are 300-400 bucks,
Oh,
or 20 years old,
I mean,
so
I always come back to this. You said that Bruce Lee quote, and it's so accurate. I could go out and buy whatever Matthews, Hoyt, any of them tomorrow. I could go over to Shields, get the latest and greatest. I could spend $1,800 on it, deck it out, and I could be, well over $2,000 on this thing. There is somebody out there with a recurve bow that 30 yards or less would outshoot me with that
mhm,
bow because that is what they do. Now, 60 yards might be different, just that changes stuff. But even out to 60, I'm sure there's some recurve feeders that are incredible. So it's the same thing with running. I coach a lot of people and I get a lot of questions about, do you need this? Do you need that? I try to tell the new people the best thing you can do is go for a run. Don't
mhm,
don't sit there and stare at your heart rate. Don't stare at your pace. If you're just running and you can have a conversation,
mhm,
you're doing fine. You're not going too hard. Like regardless of what your watch says, just run. And it's the same with the bow. Like you just said about the $300-400 bow. If you have a $300-400 bow and you shoot it, if you shoot 100 shots a day with a $300-400 bow, you are going to be better than 99% of the people that have $2,000 bows. It's just
mhm,
it's getting the technique down of doing the same exact thing every time. And that's a lot of what bow hunting is. Or shooting a bow is not necessarily hunting. That, is more to it with that. But you can attest to this that when you shoot a bow to be a great shot, you have to do the same exact thing every single time. Where you
mhm.
hold, your release point, all of that stuff, it's a technique. And the more you do it, the better you get. So you're absolutely right. Like shoot, get good at one thing and don't go on social media and say, well, this guy killed this buck because he's got, you know, a Hoyt, whatever, RX8 or, whatever they're on now. That didn't make the difference. That person, that could be a female, kills, killed that deer because they probably were ready for that bow.
Yeah,
And they would have done it with a $300 or $400 bow.
yeah.
So you're right. That's my
And
take.
and I think the one last thing that I'll add to that, and to give people a little bit of perspective on my process throughout the year, is when I come into archery season, it is kind of a prep in and of itself where everything is kind of peaking because I'll kind of start like let's just say archery season ended. I will turn the poundage down on my bow. I hunt with an 80-pound bow. Through the off season, I really like to shoot at around 70 pounds. And I'm going to shoot 3D league. I'm going to shoot, really enjoyed this last winter, like shooting at paper, like target, 20 yards. That's super beneficial. I'm going to keep doing that. And then I'm going to shoot at the 3D range in like early spring. And I'm going to be thinking about where do I want my arrow setup to be. I'm going to build those arrows. I'm going to be shooting those arrows probably from like May through August. I'm going to be increasing the poundage. I'll be going from 70 to 75, 75 to 80. I'm going to have to do some different sight tapes in there. This is just me. Like I said, I've invest the time and energy into these things. And then coming into August, I'm going to be shooting only broadheads. I'm going to be shooting the Sever broadhead. It has practice mode. I have a ton of them. And the ones that I shoot for practice, I do not hunt with, but they're basically practice points and they're going to fly like a broadhead flies, not how a field point flies. So like last year, going into hunting season, I was shooting my broadheads at 125 yards and grouping them on a 3D elk target. The confidence that I had going into season, knowing my broadheads are hitting a basketball sized group at 125 yards, man, you just feel unstoppable. And you have to build up to that. Like that's kind of in race prep when your zone 2 run is like, man, I've never been this fast and my heart rate has never been this low. Like you just know your fitness is there and then you taper into the race and you're just like, man, you feel like you're on fire. Like your fitness is just dialed. So if you want to be a really successful archer, I would begin looking at that year-long progression of peaking and then after the season kind of coming back down. And I know John Dudley, like he has a whole YouTube series on basically doing just that, rebuilding your shot process, the fundamentals of archery. And that stuff is golden. I think there's a lot of good information and knowledge that you can take away from going through one of those processes or going and shooting your hunting bow at a paper Las Vegas face at 20 yards. You're going to learn some stuff about your shot process and what it's like to be on. Like, this is the first time I've never shot like competition. And I just went and shot league night on a Tuesday night at the archery shop at paper at 20 yards. And the pressure, is fun. It's a lot of fun. So,
yeah, well, you know what they say, pressure is a privilege. So
mhm.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of good stuff, and I hope, I hope people listen to this that are wanting to get into the hunting game and they take some good stuff away because I think you had a lot of valuable information on there. And want to wish you luck with the firefighting thing. And next year, after 2026, whatever you get during the season, we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So, yeah, just thanks for coming on the Backcountry Cardio Podcast, Cody. Nothing but the best moving forward with your endeavors.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it. And look forward to hearing how the Chicago marathon goes for you. What's your target pace time real quick before we hop off?
Probably, if I'm under 2:19, I'll be happy. That's
Okay.
not a PR, just because I've been so busy this summer with travel. I don't feel
Yeah.
like I've truly been able to train. I've been training well, but I don't feel like I've been training quite well enough. But next spring, I think I'll be able to let one rip because winter training for me is easier. We don't have camping trips. We don't have all this stuff going on. It's
Mhm.
kind of like I'm locked in at home and I wake up and I train. It's cold out. We're not traveling. We're not going to rivers. We're not. We went to France this summer. There's a lot going on. So yeah, if I can run sub 2:16 in the spring, I'll be thrilled.
Awesome. Well, I always love following along with the journey. It's
Absolutely.
fun to see. I've only done, well, I did the Steamboat Marathon. I know we had talked about that. And then I can't remember if we had talked about the one road marathon that I did with zero training. Did you hear about that?
You told me last time, I think.
Yeah, that was it was my brother's race and I didn't do it to steal his thunder, but I was like, what is the best way I can support him in this race? And then finally I was just like, I just need to go with him and pace him. So I signed up last minute. I had trail running shoes on and like a cotton t-shirt. And this was after, it was 3 months after the ultra marathon. And it was funny because, like I said, the cardio was there, but the legs were not. So
Right.
after mile 18, everything locked up and it was super sore. And it was like just David Goggins mentality to get through it at that point. But it was a good mental preparation of like pushing through the pain.
Absolutely, man.
Doing those types of hard things, man, that is a big aspect of being a bow hunter. That's the last thing
100%.
I'll say.
All right, man. Well, again, thanks for coming on the Backcountry Cardio Podcast, and we'll keep in touch.
All right, sounds good. Take care. Thanks for having
Thanks,
me.
man.